Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. One of the questions I am often asked on this channel is what bikes I currently have in the garage, and I thought the best way to answer that question is to go through the bikes brand by brand. In today's fun In the Garage video, we'll be taking a look at 5 of my recent classic Kawasaki restoration projects. As we go through the bikes, I'll give a little bit of information about each of them. I'll also talk briefly about what I did to restore the bikes and get them back out on the road. And then we'll take each one of them out on the road to see what they're like to ride. The first 3 bikes we'll look at are my KZ1000 projects. We'll also look at my 1983 GPZ1100 and my 2002 Kawasaki ZZR1200. I have featured each of these bikes previously on this channel, and I'll include a playlist for each of them in the comment section below. That way, if you're interested in seeing exactly what was done to the bikes over the course of time that I've owned them, you can watch through that video series and see the modifications that I've made to bring these beautiful classics back to life. If you like great motorcycle content and you want to help support this channel, please consider becoming a member. Members get perks like early access to new videos and bonus features on this channel, and your support will help me continue to make great quality motorcycling videos for you to enjoy. And I just want to give a special shout out to all of my members and subscribers and those of you who participate in the comment section of this channel. Thank you guys so much. I could not do this without you. Anybody who's familiar with classic motorcycles from the 1970s and 1980s is familiar with Kawasaki's KZ1000. The first KZ1000 debuted in 1977. It was the follow-on model to the 900cc Z1 and KZ900 models that Kawasaki had introduced in the early 70s. Kawasaki produced many different models of the KZ1000, and as a younger person, I really did not care which model we were talking about. I wanted a KZ1000 in the worst way. They've always been a dream bike for me. Fast forward to today, more recently I've picked up 3 KZ1000 project bikes. I've gone through these bikes and restored them, and I've also performed some upgrades to the bikes that really allow them to perform as they should. The bikes that are featured in this video are the 1978 KZ1000. This one is set up like an A model, but it started life as a KZ1000 LTD. I'll go over that more as we go through the bikes individually. The next bike I'll feature is Kawasaki's 1979 KZ1000 Shaft. And the final bike we'll look at is the 1981 Kawasaki KZ1000 CSR. The first bike we'll look at is Kawasaki's 1978 KZ1000. As I said earlier, this bike actually started life as a KZ1000 LTD. I purchased this bike as a rolling chassis with a separate engine and bins of parts. This has been a long-term project for me, but I am really liking the way that it's turning out so far. As much as I like the LTD models, I really wanted the standard style KZ1000, and to that end, I have replaced the seat and the tank on this bike with the KZ1000A parts, and I'm coming down the home stretch on this beautiful project. Upgrades that I've made to this bike to increase the safety and performance on it include a full Kirker exhaust. I've also put a lower handlebar on it that gives more control in the corners. I've upgraded the brake lines with steel braided Spiegler brake lines, and I've replaced the rear shocks on this bike. Let's see how it sounds out on the road.
feels really nice. It sounds really good too with the Kirker exhaust. That pulls nice.
The next bike we'll be looking at is Kawasaki's 1979 KZ1000 shaft. The KZ1000 shaft was developed more as a touring bike to compete with the Goldwing, Suzuki's GS1000G, and XS1100 from Yamaha. I bought this motorcycle several years ago as a full-dress touring model, and I have since stripped it down back to the standard model. The chrome and the paint on this bike are all original. I'm the second owner on this motorcycle, and it's just a beautiful example of an almost all-stock KZ1000 shaft. Modifications that I've done to this bike are limited to a lower handlebar for better control in the corners and Spiegler brake lines, in addition to progressive suspension springs in the front forks. In 1979, Kawasaki went in and they modified the motors in all of their KZ1000 models, and they bumped the horsepower, about 10 horsepower. In 79, Kawasaki also squared off the styling on a lot of their KZ1000 models, and so a lot of people actually prefer the styling on the pre-79 models that was more rounded, but I think Kawasaki did a nice job on the squared off styling as well. Let's see what this bike is like to ride. The next bike we'll look at is Kawasaki's 1981 KZ1000 CSR. This bike was heavily based on the KZ1000J Sport Standard style motorcycle, which was actually the quickest KZ1000 model ever produced. Kawasaki's CSR and LTD motorcycles represented their cruiser line. Those bikes differed mainly in the wheels. The LTD featured the mag wheels and the CSR featured the spoke wheels. The KZ1000 CSR has a slick shifting 5-speed transmission. I purchased this bike several years ago as a non-runner, and I've gone through the process of restoring it. I have mounted a lower handlebar on it, as well as a Delcovic exhaust. I've also replaced the brake lines with Spiegler steel braided brake lines. This one definitely feels the sportiest and the least cruiser-like. Functionally, the CSR 1000 is a generation ahead of the other two motorcycles in the way that it performs, and it's honestly my favorite one to ride. Let's see what it's like to ride out on the road.
That's awesome.
The next long-term project bike I have here is Kawasaki's 1983 GPZ1100. I also bought this bike several years ago. I've installed this new gas tank, and this gas tank is rust-free on the inside. Whereas the original tank that was on this bike looked great on the outside, it had rusted on the inside. Subsequently, it had been lined on the inside and the lining was coming off in sheets, and I really didn't want any of that debris getting down into my motor and damaging anything. So I have swapped out the gas tank. That is on here now. I'm very happy about that. I have the new clutch waiting to go in, so hopefully this week I can get to that and get the new clutch in this bike. If you look at the stance of the bike, you can tell that it is long and low. The current setup on this bike is a drag strip setup. It has an extended swing arm on it. It's also strutted, meaning that it has no rear suspension currently. It's a solid rear on the bike. And because of that, this is really more of a street and show bike. It's something that I could ride to a local show fairly close to the house. I don't really want to ride it long distances without having decent rear suspension on it. Although this isn't bad for a hardtail. It actually rides fairly decent. I do have all the parts to convert this to the stock swing arm setup. I also have a full set of stock exhaust if I want to go that way. I'm leaning towards putting the stock swing arm back on it and stock suspension in the rear, and that would allow me to enjoy this bike as a daily driver and a bike that I could ride longer distances when I want. That's probably the direction I'm going to go, but again, it's kind of a novelty having the drag strip set up on it, and it kind of looks cool.
Unfortunately, it still slips just a little bit at higher RPM. The bike is running great. I hadn't run it in about a week, and when I fired it up a little bit ago, it just fired right up. No issues. Yeah, I felt the solid rear end right there. Surprisingly, for the amount of power that this thing has, and for its long, low, racy looks, it is very easy to drive. It's very stable, and the stability is a little bit deceptive maybe, because I want to push it a little harder in the corners. It really does track nicely right now, but I'm afraid that if I do too aggressively, I'm going to be dragging that exhaust.
Next up, we'll be looking at the 2002 Kawasaki ZZR1200. The ZZR1200 holds the distinction of being the most powerful carbureted motorcycle ever produced. At the crankshaft, it produced an astounding 165 horsepower. The ZZR1200 was the pinnacle of the ZX11 line of motorcycles. It was designed for the European market as an ultra-fast sport touring motorcycle. When I purchased this bike, it was a non-runner. I have since got it running and back out on the road, and I've gone through and serviced the bike from front to back. I've put new tires on it. I've also put EBC brake rotors in the front with EBC pads and Spiegler steel braided brake lines. This really drastically improves the braking performance. I've also replaced the steering stem bearings on the ZZR with tapered roller units, and that also stiffens up the front end. And finally, I've added thicker fork oil to the front end, and that improves the damping and the braking performance as well. This motorcycle also features a Corbin seat, and that drastically improves the long distance comfort. The ZZR is just a tremendously fast, powerful, smooth, and relatively comfortable sporting motorcycle, and it's a worthy addition to Kawasaki's long line of blazingly fast motorcycles. Let's see what it's like to ride.
Warp speed, anyone? And it just flows down through. Yeah.
All right, man, what a lot of fun. If you would have told me as a younger man that I would have all of these classic Kawasaki's in the garage when I was older, I probably wouldn't have believed you. It's such a treat to get to ride these classic bikes and to rescue them and to get them back on the road. And not only that, but to bring the safety level of the brakes and the suspension more into the modern era so that they can be safely enjoyed for years to come. I don't know if any of you out there have some long-standing classic bike projects that you're working on. If so, feel free to comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you got, what you're working on, where it's at in the process. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. And until next time, enjoy the ride.